The average American has 300,000 things that they own. We live in a consumeristic, materialistic world that's constantly focused on getting more and more. We buy bigger houses, we rent storage units so that we can fit all of our stuff. And yet, that's not the way of Jesus. You see, we live in this world that is focused on getting more and more, buying more and more. It's even like a drug, right? Shopping can become an addiction in our lives. We just want more and more, and we think that those things will make us happy. And that's why today I want to talk about the spiritual discipline of simplicity. Now, this isn't one that maybe you're used to hearing about. It's not one that I was even aware of until just a couple months ago. And we often don't think of it as a spiritual practice, as a spiritual discipline. But it is, and I want to tell you more about that today. So as we talk about this, what do we mean by simplicity? Well, the world often calls this minimalism. You may have heard something about it. Greg McNown in his book Essentialism calls it the disciplined pursuit of less. Other people like the minimalists, Matt D'Avella, Joshua Becker, talk about getting rid of the excess in our lives to make room for what's really important, right? It's getting rid of all the extra stuff to focus on what's really important in our lives. And I think there's two categories that we need to look at when we think about this. One is our physical possessions, and the other is our schedule. What's going on in our time? We fill up our schedules so much. I talked about before how we make an idol out of busyness. We fill up our schedules with all of this different stuff going on. And because of all that clutter in our lives, we don't have time for what's really important. Like I said before, I didn't think of this as a spiritual discipline. A little over a year ago, Jill and I adopted minimalism, right? We went through every single thing in our house and we got rid of tons of stuff. I have no idea how much that I could quantify, but it felt like probably over half of our stuff that we just got rid of. We got rid of 7 pieces of furniture. If you know how big our house is, you know that's a lot to get rid of, right? We took countless trips to Goodwill, Salvation Army, Habitat for Humanity. We went to the dump a couple times. We got rid of so much of our stuff. And at the time, I was doing it because of the stuff I had been reading about minimalism and that it helps with stress. It helps you help keep your house cleaner. It's just a better way to live. And yet I didn't think much about the spiritual aspects of it. But after I did it, I started to notice that there was something spiritual going on, that there was a benefit there that I hadn't noticed before. And we see that in the life of Jesus. You see, these spiritual practices, it's not as though there's a list in the Bible, remember? These are looking at Jesus and the way he lived and modeling our life after him. We want to live like Jesus lived. And Jesus lived a simple life. I mean, I just want you to think about it this way. What did Jesus own? Can you count how many possessions Jesus owned? We don't really know. It doesn't really say. What we do know is that when we went to his death, what did they cast lots for? What did they roll the dice for? The clothes on his back. It seems that all he had at that time were the clothes on his back. And we never hear, when he's in the upper room with the disciples in the Last Supper, we never hear him telling them about his will and that John is going to get his fishing boat and James is going to get his lake house. And we don't hear those different things because I don't think that they're true. Jesus didn't have much. He led a simple life, right? He didn't have a lot of physical possessions. And the other thing is, he didn't have a lot of meetings, a lot of speaking engagements. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't meet with a lot of people and speak a lot, right? He was regularly doing things, and yet his schedule was clear for what was important. And we see him taking time every day to give in to good distractions, right? When he's on the way to heal a dying girl, he stops to heal this other woman. And he makes room for that in his life. And so we see Jesus practicing this simplicity. Now, as we look at Jesus' life, there's plenty of things that we may not do just as Jesus did. He lived in a different culture in a different time. And yet, the reason why simplicity was important to Jesus is the reason why it's important for us today. And the reason why is it enabled him to focus on his mission. You think if Jesus had multiple houses and fishing boats and lots of possessions, he would have been distracted from his mission, right? If he had all these different schedule, appointments, meetings, conferences going on, he would have been distracted from his mission. And that really brings it to what's important about this. This isn't just a self-help kind of thing. This isn't just a way to have less stress and a cleaner house. This is a way to focus on what's important. And what's important is the mission that Jesus gave us, the mission to make disciples. And the more stuff we have, the less we're going to be focused on that mission. You see, the more stuff we have, the more time you have to spend with that stuff, right? If you have a bigger house, the more time you have to spend on upkeep and cleaning, right? If you have a bunch of recreational things like, if you have a boat and jet skis and a trailer and, dirt bikes and four-wheelers and all that kind of stuff, in order to justify that, you're going to be out every single weekend on those things instead of on the mission of Jesus. Now, it's not bad to have those things, but the whole point of this is what's distracting us, what's getting in the way from us being on our mission with Jesus, and even physical possessions do that. And it's also good to take a look at what's going on in your life. I've talked about before that we idolize busyness. We fill up our schedules with lots of stuff so that we can feel important. And yet, how much of that stuff that we fill up our schedules is focused on the mission that Jesus gave us, to make disciples, to grow in love for Him and love for other people. And so what I want to encourage you today is you don't have to go and get rid of all of your stuff, although that may be where God leads you, is to get rid of a bunch of your stuff. But what I want you to think about is what is standing in the way, what is distracting you from your mission that Jesus gave you to make disciples, to even become a better disciple yourself, to be with Jesus more. So often we fill up our schedules so much we don't even have time to spend reading the Bible and prayer. And that's why simplicity is important for spiritual practices as a whole. Because if you don't have time, if you're constantly distracted by the things that you own to have a spiritual life, to practice spiritual things, then we're wasting our life, right? Simplicity is about getting rid of the extra so we can focus on what's important. And what's important in your life is Jesus.